court's call for a boycott of the 2017 election. They say their considerations, or rather their suggestions, were not taken into consideration by the Electoral Boundaries Commission, the independent commission, I should add. That is the question tonight. Keep your comments coming in. The hashtag we're using is Checkpoint. SMS is 22155. My panel to discuss that tonight: Ngunjiri Wambugu is a political commentator, and we have Professor Gitile Naituli, a commissioner with NCIC, and Edwin Sifuna, who's a lawyer. Tonight, that is the discussion. So the best place to start is with you, Edwin. Why is court calling for a boycott of the election?
Well, the reasons why anyone would call for a boycott of an election are basically universal. If, for instance, there is fears that there's going to be fraud in an election, or that the entity that is running the election or the electoral system is essentially biased against that party, or that the entity that is running that election is an entity that lacks legitimacy, then you are justified in making calls for boycott of an election.
All right. And
in our situation, I believe that we have those three circumstances in this country that would justify any person who is making a call for a boycott of an election, because the fears that we had, especially after the 2013 election, that there was fraud in that election, have not been addressed by the current commission, and there is every reason to believe that that fraud can be repeated again in subsequent elections. And you
don't believe that the strategic plan that has been launched for the next 5 years will address that?
Well, I have read that strategic plan, and it is the most ridiculous document that I have ever read, because if you can tell me that you can conduct a SWOT analysis for the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission in this country, and you do not even bring up the issues of integrity that have been leveled against the commissioners, and you identify some of the weaknesses. For instance, they have identified a weakness in the strategic plan as, you know, their offices are not adequate, or that they are not conducive for their work environment. Really? That is what a SWOT analysis of IEBC brought up, that their offices in the 7 or 6 floors that they occupy at Anniversary Towers are somehow not conducive enough to carry out elections. Then you can see that that document is a ridiculous document. It does not address the serious issues that have been raised against the commission, and that it is a document that should be trashed. Nobody should take that document seriously.
Ngunjiri?
I actually personally think CORD is just following a tried and true strategy that they've used in the past. This is not the first electoral commission that Raila Odinga, because CORD tends to just circulate around him, has challenged. In 2008, he actually threatened to lead a team to go and kick out Kivuitu from his offices. In fact, when I was researching to come here, I realized a lot of what I'm hearing now is like copy and paste of what that political establishment was saying in 2008. So what I think, in my opinion, what CORD is doing, CORD is preparing us psychologically. One, in case they lose the election, they've basically just developed the platform.
An election you're not participating in.
But there's no, first and foremost, there are also certain things that we need to understand. IEBC conducted close to 2,000 elections in 2013. Mm-hmm. They had 180 petitions. 120 of them were thrown out or were finalized in 3 months. Now, this feeling by CORD that the IEBC is only supposed to think about the presidential election, that we don't think about any other election, and we have really a lot of elections that happen, a lot of which CORD does not complain about. In fact, despite them complaining about IEBC, they have participated in by-elections consistently since 2013.
Okay.
So it's just a game they're playing. I actually don't believe they mean to boycott the elections. They're just used to throwing threats around at us and hoping we are going to get.
All right, Ngunjiri makes a fair point. I mean, there's been several by-elections from 2013 to date, all of which CORD have participated in. Kajiado, we had the Homa Bay senatorial by-election, there was the by-election.
But this is what you need to understand. The games that are played during elections in this country are seen in their most sinister in the presidential election. And if you look at the statistics, for instance, the results that were coming out during the election, the biggest questions that were raised around the presidential election, and it is understandable that the stakes are the highest in that election.
So Edwin, you have faith in IEBC to conduct what you would like to call the smaller elections, but not the big one, which is the presidential one?
It is not about having faith in them conducting the small election. What we are saying is this: as a commission, and the people who are occupying those offices right now, they lack legitimacy to conduct any election in this country.
How?
Because if you look at, that's what I was referring to, the SWOT analysis that was done, that is the basis of this strategic plan.
So they lack legitimacy to conduct an election?
Listen, yes, because there have been very serious integrity issues. There have been very serious integrity issues that have been raised against the commissioners, including the chairman of the commission and all the other commissioners. We have had cases in the UK where people have been jailed for essentially giving bribes to this very commission that we're talking about. But this is the
other by-elections.
Which other body would you want us to go to? Unfortunately, the law, this is the question that you need to address, that unfortunately the law has given us this commission, but you should understand that the commission is not Isaac Hassan. If questions have been raised about the integrity, about the people who are in IEBC, what is so difficult about getting these people out of the commission and having people with integrity?
I know you want to go to him, but
he hasn't spoken.
A couple of things that Edwin is trying to misinform us. One, a court actually struck out the whole idea of Hassan being involved in Chicken Gate.
Why? Please explain why it was struck out. It was struck out on the basis that he was not given an opportunity to be heard. It was not substantive.
All right,
he didn't say that when he was busy saying he still has a case. Number two, he's saying that they have participated in the elections that have been happening because that's the only thing that they have. They're threatening to boycott the 2017 one. I wish we could see them boycott by elections.
All right,
so that we can actually see, yes, them hold, but they keep participating in them.
All right, let's bring in Professor for a moment. It's 2015. The elections are about 2 years away, and we're talking about a boycott now. What do you think? Give us your reaction to that at this point.
First, let me say that Conde has a right to make the noise they are making. That's what the opposition is supposed to do. What is surprising me, though, is for them to say they'll boycott the election. It tells me that they actually don't understand this country. The situations which a party can succeed in boycotting an election does not pertain here. Those situations require that the rank and file of the party has values, the values that the party owns, and those values are imbued in their members. And therefore, if those values are infringed, the party is unwilling to compromise those values. It can therefore go an election, and that can succeed. Now, an election boycott cannot succeed in Kenya because we have no values. We go to election to look for a job, whether you are an MCA or a governor. Now, if the court actually want to test that in ground, believe me, they should try it. There will be people running for governors across the country. They will run for MCAs across the country. The end result is that only the presidential boycott may succeed, but not the others. Now, the other thing is, as a serious party, I don't think they should issue a threat they cannot enforce. It will be difficult to enforce a boycott in Kenya. Second, both the ruling coalition current and the opposition should have an interest in the cohesive of the country. Before any of them issues a statement that is supposed to divide the country, they have to sit down and think whether this is really necessary. So when you look at a strategic plan, unless someone else tells me another meaning of a strategic plan, I understand it to be a working, internal, document of an organization.
Prof, should the IEBC have invited views from the political parties, on where they're headed for the next 5 years? Because, and we spoke to the Vice Chair a little earlier on, some say they brought this on themselves. They should have launched their strategic plan, which is an internal document, and then have everybody talk about it. But the fact that they asked for consultations would mean that one party would feel hurt if, their views are not taken into consideration.
I agree completely, because once they then ask people to contribute, then they ought to take those into consideration, and when they don't, they ought to explain, because the consultation as dictated by our constitution, it really doesn't need concurrence. It means that you must listen to me and listen to my view, and if I reject you because I have executive authority, then I must explain to you why your point is not taken.
All right.
Actually, just to respond to what he's saying, you see, the IEBC does not have a choice in the issue of public participation. This is something that they are mandated to do under the Constitution. If you look at that strategic plan, they are saying it is built on 3 pillars. One of those pillars is public trust and public participation, which essentially means that you should address the issues that have led to the erosion of public trust in the IEBC. If you look at the last poll that was done on Kenyans' confidence in the IEBC, only 42% of Kenyans expressed confidence in this IEBC.
Okay, all right.
That leaves out an entire 58% of Kenyans who do not have confidence in the IEBC as constituted.
All right, that's a point.
So
I think
why
we
would
can bring in Ngunjiri then and just ask whether you believe, IEBC has sufficiently addressed the concerns of the public. I mean, for sure, 2013, the elections could have been run better. There are issues that are indisputable at this point.
And actually, COD wants us to go back into the same problem. Because remember, part of the problem that we had with IEBC in 2013 was because people have forgotten. IEBC was actually set up in 2011. It had 2 years to set up structures to run 6 elections for the first time. Yeah? We did not have... They were buying, they were delimiting, they were reorganizing constituencies, they did a lot of stuff in preparation for the 2013 election. They had only 2 years to do it. They made mistakes. Some of those mistakes are some of the things
that we... Do you think they've been addressed?
They haven't.
Do you think the public has confidence?
That is the basis of everyone's fear.
They have been addressed, because we also need to ask ourselves, how come we only have COD complaining, And you see, unlike in other countries where you can actually say that you have a membership, when you speak as COD, you're speaking on behalf of a certain number of people. The problem we have in this country is that when you stand up and speak, and then you say that I'm holding this position on behalf of the 5.4 million people who voted for me. That's not true.
So you don't think COD is speaking on behalf of the millions of people?
Absolutely not.
Who is it speaking?
So who are they speaking on behalf of?
Let me explain to you why. Let me explain to you why. COD has the second highest number. Is it the highest number of members of parliament in parliament?
ODM.
ODM.
Yes. Not
and then
COD.
they have that, which is part of COD. Now you would expect that if they're having a situation where they're arguing about their problem with the IEBC, we would be seeing it coming from the people who are actually put in office by IEBC. Because these are the people who...
But we have heard it from Senator Mudama, who, is on record as saying...
He said they're going to boycott this election.
Absolutely.
But
the point was put in there by
Yvonne, the point I'm trying to make is this. We get carried away every time COD, or even Jubilee, by the way, for that matter. Let me just throw this on both sides. We are not a country... A lot of Kenyans, majority of Kenyans, take a political position when they are going to vote. You can't sit here and say that because you're speaking like this, you're representing a certain majority of people.
Let me say what I would like to say. Prof in, and then we can
let me say what I want to hear.
Right.
What I want to hear, you say or him say. I want to hear Condi saying that these were the deficiencies, the failings in the last election. I want to hear the Electoral Commission explaining how we have solved this problem, not in just to CONT, but to the country, because the whole idea is to build the confidence in such a way that there is dignity and transparency, and the outcome of the electoral process is respected, because the transparency is understandable to everybody. Now, so it is the honors of the Electoral Commission to educate us, all of us, to tell us these are the issues raised and this is how they are being addressed. Now what I really, I don't want to see is when I read in the newspaper and I see that we raise certain issues. They are not disclosing which issues. COND is not also disclosing which issues. 50 points. It raised or 55. What we want to hear also from them is if they feel that there is anyone who is short-circuiting COND, then COND also can go to the public opinion by listing in very clear terms that these are the areas which we need to address.
Let me stop you there, because in that press release that was done earlier in the week, they did raise a number of those concerns. They talked about the process, they talked about the content, they talked about the technology that was used, particularly with the voter identification, with the voter transmission process. They listed these out.
And they have also said how they needed them addressed.
They have. The system failed miserably, not because it encountered technological problems, but it was, apparently designed to fail. But they went into great details to talk about some of these issues
now,
that were there.
The NCIC then need really to look at that very carefully and need to answer. If they think they cannot answer, at least to CONT, they can satisfy us as voters. Because the critical thing is a cohesive system. It's an electoral system that we can live with.
Okay, Prof.
Yvonne, that is precisely where the problem is. That we experienced the 2013 elections together as a country. that we know where the failures were. That in our minds we have certain suspicions about certain processes, and we've pointed them out. For instance, if you look at the exit polls or the results of the election last time, and the figures that were put out by IEBC, for instance, on registration, we have been told, for instance, if you look at that document, they're talking a strategic plan, they talk of having 15,000 registration kits, 15,800 registration kits that were spread over 24,500 registration centers.
Right.
But you look at the registration figures in Central Province, for instance, in the strongholds of our opponents, and you find that they were registering 120, 130%, and we have way lower figures in certain areas. All we're asking, for instance, if I have a fear that there was an even distribution of voter registration equipment across the country, that is something you can sit down with me and tell me, you disabuse me of that notion that this was what happened.
So what you're saying is
all those things, yes, all of those things we have not gone through them. We have not gone through them with the Independent Electoral Commission.
Okay, Ngunjiri, very quickly, I have one more question before we wind up.
My problem with how court, the whole idea of court threatening to boycott elections, because you see, they're using the excuse of a strategic plan. They want that strategic plan recalled. They want it. Basically, they want IEBC to stop operating, because that's what a strategic plan is supposed to make you operate. They want you to pause, listen to us before you do anything. IEBC is telling them, this is our working document. It's an internal document. It is for us to organize ourselves. If there are certain things you don't like in this document, come tell us. We will fix them. The
but IEBC is but a referee. They don't play the game. The elections are not about IEBC.
The second problem with CORD is that they tend to assume that they're the only stakeholders in the electoral process in this country. I haven't had anybody else complaining about that.
Who do you want to complain? But the other side is very busy cheering the IEBC on.
We are all
the jig that the only people the speaker was doing with the commissioners of the IEBC. We are very happy with the situation.
CORD are not the only ones who participate in elections in
CORD is your primary.
But they are.
Yeah, they are the biggest stakeholder.
The fact that they are unhappy with this process doesn't mean we're going to stop it.
All right, but the fact that they're unhappy with certain issues, should we address those issues?
They should be addressed.
Okay.
Of course we should. But you see, they should address it. They should raise them. This idea of negotiating by ultimatums and threats is not taken as anywhere.
All right, okay.
Let me just say something. Yes. You see, I will give you the analogy of a game of soccer. A game of soccer is played by the teams that are playing. The best referee in a game of soccer is a referee you will never hear about. Yeah, so we have a situation here where every time we have elections, we are talking about the referee. What Ngunjiri needs to understand, we are not interested in the internal workings of the IEBC are not for the IEBC itself.
Okay.
The IEBC does not participate in elections. It's for the players.
Very quickly, because I'd like us to address this issue. Every time CORD talks about the IEBC, it's very clear that you say you do not want the IEBC, especially with Isaac Hassan as the chair.
Precisely.
You do not believe that the commission led by Isaac Hassan will be able to conduct a legitimate election process.
Yes.
What is this that CORD has against the IEBC chair?
It is an issue of integrity. If the accusations that have been made against the commissioners, for instance, on the issues of corruption, as things that raise serious concerns, I do not want to sit here and imagine that these commissioners have a special breed of corruption, that they will only accept money from overpriced tenders or the other accusations that are being made. If, for instance, I am somebody who's corrupt and driven by greed, why is it that I should be viewed to choose money from over-inflated tenders and not from my political opponents? I know you're referring to the Auditor General's report, but on the 29th of May, Justice Lenaola asked that his name be expunged from that report. Why?
He talked about the fact that he wasn't even the one who called in Tom Colby into that
The reason that Justice Lenaola removed his name from that report is because he was never given an opportunity by the Auditor General to explain himself. That is the reason that was given by the court.
There's a point I need to make. There's a point that that is getting lost in this whole conversation. First and foremost, in this period, this argument that court tends to have about money having been stolen when procurement was being done, we forget that Raila Odinga, who was a court presidential candidate, was Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya and a core principle of government when all this procurement was being done. He was in charge as much as the president was in
Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister
was in charge of IEBC procurement.
Let me explain. We did, these guys forget, I was in court at that time, when court was doing, when registration was happening, when procurement was being done, when the systems were being tested, court participated in every part of that process. That is the reason you never had them complaining until the election. These complaints started happening after election. These processes, procurement of equipment was done way before election. So the point I want to make, Yvonne.
Nonetheless, whether or not the Prime Minister was there, unless you are implying that he was privy to what was happening within the commission at the time, that does not take away from the fact that there was happening.
By the way, the point I needed to make, the point I needed to make, you see what these guys are saying about Isaac Hassan is the same argument they said about Kivuito and ECK. They got to the point where they did not want ECK to proceed with Kivuito in charge.
Okay.
By his own admission.
I think, let's have Prof in for a minute.
I think what I really would like to see is I would like to see argument on the merits of what is being said. But you know, we really need to avoid emotions on matters election, because these are matters which are very serious to the country. So both the sides need to put the merits of what they are saying on the table, and the side which doesn't agree with that, they should also tell us why they are disagreeing with that. That way now we can have a very reasoned argument, an argument that generates knowledge that can move us forward. Okay. So emotions, we need
emotions aside. All right. As we conclude, Sifuna, Philip Atala is tonight on Twitter saying a threat is never fake. So what happens if the IEBC does not recall their strategic plan? Can we say today, right here, on this day, the 12th of July 2015, that you will boycott the elections in 2017?
By the way, there is a very big misunderstanding. The strategic plan that the IEBC has put out is but a continuation of a system of clear bias by a person who's supposed to be independent arbiter of an electoral process. It is not about the strategic plan. It is about addressing the issues that are being raised by stakeholders in a manner that leaves everyone having confidence in the IEBC.
All right, Edwin,
you will remember, we have said more than enough times that we cannot go into an election with the IEBC as currently constituted. That is not a threat. It is a promise.
Okay. Ngunjiri?
I think he used a very good example of a football, of a soccer match. And my problem is that we've had soccer matches in this country. We have many players. Only one keeps coming back to say that the referee was biased. And my problem is that we are getting to a point as a country where it looks like the only time the electoral body is going to be free and transparent and professional is when Raila Odinga wins. For as long as he loses, then we're going to have a problem with that electoral body. That's unfortunately the precedent that has been formed. It's just becoming a habit.
I think what needs to become clear is that elections and electoral reform are for posterity. Raila Odinga is not going to be a factor throughout the entire existence of this nation. We would like to have systems in place that would ensure a fair playing ground, whether it is Raila Odinga or Uhuru Kenyatta. You should not look at the messenger, my brother. Look at the message that is being passed. I know you have political ambitions. I know that you depend on a credible IEBC to run that election. Otherwise, you'll come back here in 2017 crying about the same thing that we are talking about here. It is not about Raila Odinga.
We have to leave it at that for now. Court says that is not a threat. It is a promise. If the issues of the IEBC are not addressed, we want to take a short break right now. Edwin, Sifuna, Gitile, Naituli, and Ngunjiri, Wambugu taking a short break. This is Checkpoint on the Point of News. All right, and we're back with Checkpoint, and your feedback is coming in thick and fast. Thank you very much for what you are saying. Levi Mwanawasa says the current IEBC should be dissolved. Kenyans lost confidence in Checkpoint. I'd just like to go around the panel tonight as we conclude our discussion. It is agreed that IEBC did suffer a public confidence crisis after 2013. I think there is no dispute here. I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there were some serious issues with the transmission of the results, with the identification processes, with the voter register, and whether that tallied across the board. So let's start with you, Ngunjiri. What are some of those key things that the IEBC needs to do to restore confidence in that, so that, you know, it is a result that can be accepted by everybody across the board?
You see, it's not even what they need to do, it's what they have been doing. We've had close to 5 by-elections since then. Each of those by-elections, they have used the technology that did not work in 2013, and it has worked. They have given a certain limit of time for election results to come out, and they have come through. You see, what CORD is doing is presenting a situation for failure, while everything that has happened since 2013 has succeeded. We've not had a single situation where CORD has said IEBC has failed in a by-election since 2013. already, but you see, and they're using, so they fixed the systems. They're using the systems that did not work.
We haven't had a presidential by-election.
Right.
However, we don't
However,
have presidential by-elections.
That is where the problem is.
You see, unfortunately, the way you guys are working is in 2018, CORD loses again. They're going to want to disband the IBC they will form now if this one is disbanded. We can't keep disbanding institutions every election, and we can't have a new electoral commission every election. Come on, guys.
All right, so for you, IBC has already been doing that and have proven that.
There's room for improvement. There's always room for improvement. But we cannot disband.
Could you give us some of those areas?
First and foremost, I think they're doing a terrible job of communication. Part of the problem these guys are complaining about is the whole idea of consultation and back and forth communication. That they can improve. Of course, we need to know a lot more about their preparations for 2017. They should tell us about the issue of the voter register. Getting people to understand that you can register even now.
Okay.
Because instead of waiting for
so better communication.
Better communication.
All right.
But we can't disband the institution.
Okay. All right.
We can't
Prof,
do that.
As we're going forward, an election is always a divisive, emotive topic. In terms of cohesion, just talk to us about how we should conduct ourselves in this dispensation.
I think because of the gravity of it, I would expect a lot of maturity from the both sides. That when an issue is raised, the issue deserves a response from both the Jubilee and the primary and CORD, because these are the primary protagonists. But IMBC also, it has a task of explaining itself to the public, because once it explains itself in very clear terms, then we can judge. We can judge if someone is just a rough rouser, is unreasonable. We as a public, we are able to judge. But the matters election should not be taken lightly by any side.
Okay. Edwin, finally?
Well, you see, Yvonne, elections are a contest. You should get yourself into contests which you know you have a fair chance of winning. I imagine the picture I keep getting in my head is of that pet hamster that keeps running in a Ferris wheel, imagining that its effort is going to pay off, that it is actually moving. What it does not know is that the way the Ferris is set up is that it is going nowhere. It doesn't matter what it does. We would like to save half of this country, me, myself included, the agony of going through a process that is already fixed. We don't want to go through the emotional trauma that this country goes through in the guise that, in the imagination that me driving from here to Bungoma to cast a vote for Raila Odinga or for Uhuru Kenyatta makes a difference, when it does not make a difference. So we should get into that election knowing very well that we actually have a fair chance of winning this election, that it is upon us, that there are things that we can do to better our position. I was the first person to admit that there are things that the Jubilee coalition did well during the campaigns, better than the opposition did. Yeah, but it should be that if we make improvements as the opposition coalition, it should make a difference. If you're getting yourself into a contest that is rigged, what in horse racing they call a sure thing, you're wasting your money betting on other horses when everyone knows which horse is going to win.
Okay, and you say it is a promise, not a threat.
It is not a threat. If those issues are not addressed, there is absolutely no point why we should legitimize a process that has been rigged from the start by participating in it, so they can go around the country saying we beat these people. Let them just win the way Bashir won his election in Sudan.
Edwin, Sifuna, Professor Gitile, Naituli, and Ngunjiri, Wambugu, we'll leave it at that. For now, we'll continue taking a look at your feedback. I thank you very much for your time on Checkpoint this evening. We'll get to your views in a moment, but we'd like to update you now on breaking news just in. You knew him for years and years on the national broadcaster, Benson Wanjao, also known as Mzee Ojwang Hatari of the show Vitimbi. Mzee Ojwang Hatari tonight is dead. He succumbed to what is said to be pneumonia today at about 8 p.m. That's about 2 hours ago, and he died at the Kenyatta National Hospital where he had been rushed earlier today. Mzee Ojwang Hatari is dead at about 8 p.m. tonight, and that was at the Kenyatta National Hospital where he had been rushed earlier this evening. May his soul rest in peace. We'll continue to update you on the plans following his death there. This is KTN News. Want to wrap up Checkpoint with What's the Point? Namo has been following that discussion. Namo?
All right, the debate about elections has been going ever since multi-partyism came back into this country in the early 90s, after that break in 1969. And, of course, the debate has centered around the people who are managing these elections, from the Electoral Commission to the IEBC. The last election had raised some extremely important credibility questions about the electoral body, the IEBC, that it is attempting to answer in its strategic plan, but doesn't seem to fully have answered. For instance, the voter register. Why were there so many different voter registers in the past election? The failures of technology, have those been sufficiently answered? If they can communicate, as Ngunjiri Wambugu said, in his past interview, if they can communicate this, if they can communicate what their failures were and how they intend to resolve them through to the public, then perhaps there can be some go forward there. But the second question here, raised by the CORD coalition with respect to boycotting this election, raises also very interesting and different points. Is boycotting endorsing the leadership of the Jubilee coalition? Is boycotting an election actually endorsing the opponents that they'd be competing against in an electoral contest? Outside of the issues that CORD has with the IEBC, they need to be able to think about whether they are shortchanging their own supporters by doing this. And is it entrenching democracy, or is it trying to deny people the right to universal suffrage by default of saying that the arbitrar is not an arbitrar at all? Now, finally, are politicians in Kenya interested in elections or in building a political infrastructure that lasts, that has posterity? That's a question perhaps that both Jubilee, CORD and all interested parties in this debate need to ask themselves. Is it about individuals? Is it about the period within certain individuals will run or not run? Or is it about building an institution, the IEBC or whichever institution will be in place, that will be there when our children go to vote, when their children go to vote, and will be looked upon as a bastion through which democracy is solidified in this country? That, this evening, is the point.